Have you ever been made to feel invisible, as if your dignity could be traded away for someone else's comfort? Imagine buying first-class tickets for a long journey with your spouse, only to be told without apology that your seats have been reassigned, not because of a mistake, not because of safety, but because someone decided you didn't belong there. Now picture the choice. Do you quietly take the humiliation, or do you stand your ground, knowing the cost might be even greater? What if it were you? What if it were your family, your partner, your loved one being pushed aside? How would you react when silence feels safer, but truth feels necessary? This is not just a story about a couple pushed to the back of a plane. It's about what happens when injustice meets resilience, when prejudice collides with quiet strength. And it forces us to ask, how many times has this happened, unseen, to people whose voices were never heard? Stay with us as we uncover a story that may feel painfully familiar and deeply necessary. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you won't miss the journey we're about to take together. Ethan Carter adjusted the cuff of his navy blazer as he stood in the departure hall of Newark Liberty International Airport. The early morning light filtered through the wide glass panels, casting long stripes across the polished floor. Travelers bustled past with rolling suitcases, announcements echoed overhead, and the scent of strong coffee drifted from a kiosk nearby. To anyone watching, Ethan looked like a man fully in his element, tall, composed, his presence quiet yet commanding. He was a CEO, a strategist, a man who carried authority without needing to speak it aloud. But this morning wasn't about business meetings or boardrooms. This morning was about celebration. Beside him stood his wife, Dr. Maya Carter. Maya wore a soft cream shawl draped over her shoulders, her curls framing a face that glowed not just with beauty but with resilience. Less than a year ago, she had been in a hospital bed, fighting stage 2 breast cancer. The surgeries, the endless rounds of chemotherapy, the fragile uncertainty of whether tomorrow would arrive, those memories were still raw. But today, Maya was here, smiling, breathing freely, walking hand in hand with her husband toward a long-awaited vacation. Paris, the city of light. Their second honeymoon, 10 years after the first. This time, every moment carried a weight of gratitude. "Do you think the Seine will be as beautiful as we remember?" Maya asked, her voice gentle, eyes searching his. Ethan gave a small smile. "Better, because this time we'll see it with different eyes. You made it through. Maya, we made it through." Her fingers tightened around his. "Then let's promise to leave everything behind on this trip. No hospital rooms, no emails, just us." Ethan chuckled softly. "Deal. At least until Monday. You know I can't promise what my inbox will do." Their laughter mingled, light and hopeful, the kind of laughter that only comes after surviving something heavy. The check-in process was smooth. Their tickets scanned for Global Air Flight GA-782 Newark to Paris, first class. The tickets had cost a small fortune, but Ethan never hesitated. After everything Maya had endured, he wanted her to experience the very best: plush seats, fine dining, comfort without compromise. She deserved nothing less. They moved through security and into the lounge. Maya paused by the wide windows overlooking the runway. "It feels surreal," she whispered. "A year ago, I couldn't even walk to the kitchen without resting. And now—" Ethan placed a hand gently on her back. "Now you're walking into Paris. Dr. Carter." She smiled, blinking away sudden tears. "Stop. You'll make me cry before we even board. Then I'll distract you with food." He gestured toward the buffet where croissants, smoked salmon, and fresh fruit gleamed under soft lighting. "We can start our Paris trip right here." Maya laughed again, and the sound drew a few curious glances. People noticed them, Ethan with his broad shoulders, and Maya with her quiet grace, but no one knew their story. To strangers, they were just another couple headed to Europe. Only Ethan and Maya carried the invisible weight of what it meant to be black professionals in spaces where they were often seen as anomalies, where success didn't erase assumptions. Boarding was announced shortly after. A stream of passengers gathered, some already impatient. The couple walked toward the gate, tickets in hand. The gate agent scanned their passes with a polite smile. "Welcome aboard, Mr. and Dr. Carter. Enjoy your flight." The words felt warm, respectful. Ethan exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Perhaps this journey would be different. As they stepped into the first-class cabin, Maya's eyes widened. Wide leather seats gleamed under ambient lighting, each pod a miniature haven. Champagne glasses sparkled on the side tables. A hush of exclusivity hung in the air, broken only by the muted conversation of the other passengers. "This is incredible," Maya whispered. "Look at this space." Ethan set their bags neatly, watching her sink into the wide recliner. The look of wonder on her face was worth every dollar. For a moment, the world felt exactly as it should, balanced, peaceful, generous. Across the aisle, however, sat a man whose presence carried a different kind of weight. Charles Whitmore. His voice boomed even when he wasn't speaking loudly, his suit tailored but his manner careless, as if the world existed to bend to his whims. He waved a hand at a flight attendant, complaining about the noise in his seat's reclining mechanism. His tone was dismissive, irritated, and entitled. Ethan noticed, but said nothing. He had seen men like Whitmore all his life, men who expected the world to rearrange itself for their comfort. Ethan had no intention of letting a stranger's behavior disturb this long-awaited trip. He leaned toward Maya. "Once we're in the air, order the champagne. Tonight we toast in Paris." She smiled, her eyes sparkling. "To Paris," she whispered. Neither of them could know that within hours. Their dream of a perfect journey would unravel, that the flight meant to carry them into celebration would instead drag them into humiliation, and that the quiet man in seat 3A, the man who looked like just another passenger, would reveal a power that could shake an entire airline to its core. The hum of boarding still filled the cabin when Ethan Carter leaned back against the plush headrest. He closed his eyes for a moment, savoring the rare feeling of stillness. The seat felt like a cocoon leather soft against his arms, the faint scent of new upholstery, the space large enough for him to stretch without brushing against a stranger. For a man used to endless meetings and sleepless red-eye flights, this was luxury. For Maya, it was restoration. She reached across the aisle, fingertips brushing his hand. "This almost feels like a dream," she said softly. "It is a dream," Ethan replied. "One we fought hard for." But as the last few passengers filtered in, Ethan noticed something shift. A lead flight attendant entered from the galley, a woman in her 50s, hair tightly pinned, her uniform pristine. Her name tag read Claudia Barnes. She carried herself with the authority of someone who had spent decades in the air, who believed she knew exactly who belonged in these seats and who did not. Claudia smiled warmly at an older couple settling into 2A and 2B, even helped the woman tuck her handbag neatly away. But when her eyes flicked toward Ethan and Maya, the warmth evaporated. Her expression flattened, the faintest trace of scrutiny narrowing her gaze. Ethan felt it immediately, that small but undeniable shift. It wasn't new to him. It was the same flicker he had seen 1,000 times before, in department stores, in executive meetings, even in his own Ivy League classrooms. A silent question. "Do you really belong here?" He had trained himself to absorb it, to catalog it, to rise above it. But he also knew that these small flickers could grow. "Did you see that?" Maya whispered once Claudia turned away. "I saw," Ethan replied. His tone was calm, but beneath it ran a current of alertness. The cabin door closed with a thud, and the crew moved briskly into the safety demonstration. Ethan glanced across the aisle at Charles Whitmore, who was already fidgeting impatiently. Charles pressed the recline button, frowned at the faint mechanical whine, and jabbed it again. When the noise persisted, he threw a glance toward Claudia. "Excuse me," he said loudly, enough for half the cabin to hear. "This seat is defective. I can't possibly use it for an overnight flight." Claudia hurried over, her voice dripping with concern. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Whitmore. Let me take a look." She crouched beside the seat, fiddling with controls. Each time the chair reclined, the faint whine returned. Charles shook his head, exasperated. "This won't work. I need to be rested for my meetings in Paris. I fly with you all the time. You know my status. Find me a proper seat." Claudia's expression hardened with determination. "Of course, sir. I'll see what we can do." Ethan watched silently. He knew enough about airline policy to understand the situation. Seats could malfunction. When that happened, passengers were usually offered compensation miles, vouchers, or a seat reassignment if available. But first class was fully booked. There were no empty pods. The proper solution was repair on the ground or compensation after the fact. What Claudia would do next, Ethan suspected, would reveal far more about her judgment than about Global Air's official policy. Dinner service began once the aircraft leveled out over the Atlantic. The smell of herb-crusted salmon and warm bread drifted through the cabin. Ethan and Maya settled in, enjoying the rare chance to dine together without interruptions. Yet Claudia's service to them was markedly different from her attentiveness to others. She poured Charles another glass of whiskey before he even asked. She brought the couple in 2A extra pillows with a smile. When Maya requested a glass of water, Claudia nodded curtly and disappeared, returning only after attending to 3 other requests first. Lucas Ramirez, the younger flight attendant assisting in first class, was the opposite. He was in his 20s, his dark hair slightly tousled, his demeanor open and genuine. When he delivered Maya's dessert, he lingered a moment to chat. First time in Paris, he asked warmly. "Yes," Maya said, her face lighting. "It's our anniversary trip. 10 years. That's wonderful." Lucas said, "Congratulations. There's a little bakery near the Louvre, best macarons in the city. My sister found it on her honeymoon. You should go." Maya smiled. "Thank you. We will." The moment was light, human, genuine. Ethan felt a flicker of relief. Not everyone on this flight saw them as strangers who didn't belong, but as Lucas moved on, Ethan caught Claudia watching from the galley. Her lips pressed into a thin line. It was the look of someone disapproving, not of service, but of recognition. Halfway through dinner, Charles's voice once again cut through the quiet cabin. "This is unacceptable," he barked. "The noise is worse when I try to sleep. I can't sit here another minute." Claudia rushed to his side. "I'm terribly sorry, Mr. Whitmore. Please give me just a few minutes. I think I can resolve this for you." Ethan's chest tightened. He saw where this was headed. Claudia scrolled quickly through her tablet, her eyes darting down the manifest. They paused briefly, unmistakably, on Ethan and Maya's names. Then she looked up at Charles. "Yes, I believe I've found a solution. Just sit tight." Ethan exchanged a glance with Maya, her brows furrowed, confusion clouding her face. "What's she doing?" Maya whispered. "Wait," Ethan said quietly. "Watch." 15 minutes later, Claudia approached their row. Her posture was rigid, her smile absent. She stopped beside Ethan's seat, tablet in hand. "Mr. and Dr. Carter," she began, her voice loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. "I'm afraid there's been a seating duplication in our system. These seats were also assigned to another passenger, one of our most valued Platinum Elite members. Due to operational necessity, we're going to have to relocate you." The words dropped like stones in the quiet cabin. Maya slowly removed her headphones, her face tightening. What she said firmly. "Our tickets were confirmed months ago. We selected these seats specifically. Claudia's smile was thin, condescending. Yes. Well, computer glitches happen. Unfortunately, we need to resolve this right away. We've found 2 seats for you in Economy Plus, a little more legroom, and of course, we'll provide a couple of drink vouchers for your trouble. The insult was suffocating. From $9,000 lie-flat first-class pods to slightly wider economy seats compensated by 2 cocktails. That's not acceptable, Maya said, her voice sharp with the authority of a doctor used to commanding a room. We paid for these seats. We have our boarding passes and email confirmations right here. Claudia's eyes hardened. The mistake is in the system, and my job is to resolve it. Now. If you'll please gather your belongings before she could finish. Charles appeared behind her. His voice carried the impatience of a man used to being obeyed. Is this sorted yet? Claudia, my seat is completely unusable. I should be sitting next to my colleague up front. Claudia's entire demeanor transformed. Her face softened, her tone sweetened. Mr. Whitmore, I'm so sorry for the delay. We're just getting it sorted now. These folks will be moving shortly. The word folks landed like a dart, casual yet cutting. Ethan felt the cabin's eyes on them, curiosity, judgment, pity. The truth crystallized in his mind. This wasn't a duplication. It wasn't a glitch. It was a choice. Claudia had decided the black couple were the path of least resistance. Ethan inhaled slowly, steadying himself. He looked directly at Claudia, his voice calm but edged with steel. Let me be very clear, he said. We are not moving. The firmness in his tone made her head snap back. She hadn't expected defiance. Sir, Claudia said, her pleasantries vanishing. I'm the lead flight attendant on this flight. My decision is final. If you refuse to cooperate, I will involve the captain, and if you continue to be disruptive, we may divert the plane and have you met by authorities. The threat hung heavy in the air, a nuclear option designed to intimidate. Passengers fell silent, watching. Maya's eyes flashed with rage. Ethan's face remained unreadable, calm as ever. Involving the captain sounds like a prudent step, Ethan said evenly. He folded his hands over his tablet. Please, by all means, let's get his input. Claudia's eyes narrowed. She had expected anger or submission, not calm defiance. With a curt nod, she pivoted and marched toward the cockpit. Charles leaned against the bulkhead, arms crossed, a smug lord awaiting servants to be displaced. Maya's hand trembled slightly in Ethan's. I can't believe this, she whispered. Stay calm, Ethan murmured. His voice carried the quiet intensity of a man not just enduring injustice, but recording it. Because Ethan Carter was not only a husband on vacation, he was also a lead auditor, and this was no longer just a trip. It was the beginning of a case. The cabin fell into a heavy silence after Claudia Barnes disappeared toward the cockpit. Ethan Carter sat still, his hands folded over his tablet, his posture calm yet resolute. He could feel the eyes of half the first-class cabin pressing in on him and Maya, weighing, judging. Some looked away quickly, uncomfortable with the spectacle. Others leaned in with open curiosity, as though waiting for a performance. Maya leaned close, her whisper taut with fury. She's lying to everyone's face. Ethan, I can't believe she's trying to humiliate us like this. I know, Ethan murmured, but losing our composure is exactly what she wants. We'll give her something she doesn't expect. Minutes stretched long. The hum of the engines and the occasional clink of cutlery filled the air. Then Claudia returned, triumphant. Behind her walked a man in his 50s, uniform crisp, jaw set. His name badge read, Captain James Whitaker. He looked tired, irritated, like a man dragged from the sanctity of his cockpit into a problem he wanted no part of. Folks, the captain began, his voice low and authoritative. I'm told there's a seating issue here. Maya sat straighter, her tone professional but firm. "There is no issue. Captain, we purchased these seats months ago. We have our boarding passes and confirmations. This flight attendant is attempting to move us under false pretenses to accommodate another passenger's complaint about his own seat." The captain glanced at Claudia, who stood beside him with the face of wounded professionalism. "Captain, the manifest shows a conflict, and Mr. Whitmore is one of our top elite members," she said smoothly. "I'm only trying to resolve an operational problem with the least disruption." Ethan watched the exchange carefully. He saw the subtle cues, the way the captain's shoulders sagged, the way his eyes skimmed past the details. This wasn't about facts. It was about convenience. "Look," Whitaker said finally, directing his words at Ethan. "I don't get involved in ticketing. My purser here runs the cabin, and I trust her judgment. If she says you need to move, then you need to move. Compensation can be sorted on the ground, but for the safety and order of the flight, I need your cooperation." Maya inhaled sharply. "Safety. How is this about safety? We're not disruptive. We're sitting in the seats we paid for. What's unsafe is punishing us for someone else's problem." The captain's eyes hardened. "Ma'am, this isn't up for debate." Ethan felt Maya trembling beside him, anger boiling under her skin. He placed a hand gently over hers, steady and grounding. He looked directly at the captain. "Then we'll move," he said quietly. "But I want your full name, and hers." He nodded toward Claudia. "For our official report." The captain hesitated, then clipped out. "Captain James Whitaker. Lead flight attendant, Claudia Barnes. Now please, gather your things." Ethan rose with deliberate calm. He slid his tablet into his briefcase, helped Maya with her tote. Each movement felt like a performance under the scrutiny of dozens of eyes. Maya's jaw was clenched, her eyes blazing as she stuffed the expensive headphones back into the amenity kit. Charles Whitmore stepped forward before they could even clear the row, sliding smugly into Ethan's vacated seat. He exhaled with satisfaction, like a king reclaiming his throne. From across the cabin, a young woman discreetly lifted her phone, angling the camera toward the scene. Her expression was troubled, intent. Her name was Alyssa Green, a law student on her way to Paris for a semester abroad. She had learned in class that documentation was the first act of resistance. Now, instinctively, she was doing just that. Maya caught the movement out of the corner of her eye. For a brief moment, the humiliation pressing on her chest eased. Someone was bearing witness. Claudia stood back with arms crossed, lips tight with vindication. "This way," she said, gesturing toward the aisle. The walk that followed was agony. The wide, hushed luxury of first class gave way to the slightly more crowded rows of premium economy, then to the dense blocks of economy. Heads turned, people whispered. A teenage boy nudged his friend and snickered. An older woman frowned. Though whether in pity or disapproval, it was impossible to tell. For Maya, every step was a blow. She had endured years of medical training, nights without sleep, a body ravaged by chemotherapy. Yet nothing compared to this, the public stripping away of dignity. The unspoken narrative playing in strangers' minds, they must have done something wrong. They didn't belong up front. Ethan walked slightly ahead, spine straight, face unreadable. But Maya knew her husband. She saw the tension in his shoulders, the iron control in every movement. She knew he was filing every detail away, turning this pain into evidence. At last, Claudia stopped near the rear galley. "Here we are," she said briskly, 42B and 42C. "Make yourselves comfortable." The seats were narrow, the air louder and staler. Their knees pressed against the hard plastic seat backs. Maya sat rigid, fury radiating from her. Ethan lowered himself silently, slipping his briefcase under the seat. A heavy-set man in 42A glanced at them curiously. "Downgrade?" he asked. "You could say that," Ethan replied, his voice calm, betraying none of the storm beneath. The reality was jarring. Minutes ago, They had been sipping wine in a private pod. Now they were wedged beside the lavatories, surrounded by the white noise of crying babies and the chemical flush of toilets. Maya leaned close, whispering fiercely, "In 2025, on an international flight, we're humiliated like criminals." Ethan placed his hand over hers. "I know," he said softly, "but this isn't over. Not by a long shot." He pulled out his phone, opened his notes app, and began to type. His fingers were precise, every line a record. Flight GA782 Newark to Paris, date September 4th, 2025. Crew involved lead FA Claudia Barnes, Captain James Whitaker, violation breach of contract, discriminatory treatment, details forcibly relocated from 3A and 3B to 42B and 42C under false pretense of seat duplication. This wasn't a complaint. It was a case file. Beside him, Maya whispered, "I should document the medical impact. Elevated blood pressure, cortisol spikes, immune suppression. Stress like this has real health consequences." Ethan nodded, adding her words to the record. "Exactly. This isn't just about comfort. It's about harm." The hours dragged. Maya dozed fitfully, her head against the rattling seatback. Ethan stayed awake, a silent observer. He timed flight attendant responses to call buttons in economy versus first class. He noted the difference in service, the demeanor of the crew. His fury sharpened into focus. Halfway through the night, during a patch of turbulence, Lucas Ramirez slipped quietly to their row. He set 2 bottles of Evian and a plate of cheese and crackers on their tray table. His voice was low, apologetic. "I thought you might need this. I'm really sorry for what happened." Ethan met his eyes. He saw genuine remorse, but also fear. "Thank you, Lucas. We appreciate it." Lucas glanced nervously toward the front, then leaned closer. "Look, I shouldn't say this, but there was no duplication. Mr. Whitmore's seat had a broken motor. He demanded a new seat. First class was full, so Claudia picked you two. She told another attendant you'd be the path of least resistance." Maya's breath caught. "Path of least resistance," she repeated bitterly. Ethan typed the words into his phone. Lucas hesitated. "I need this job. My mom depends on me for her medication. But if you file a report, I'll back you up. Quietly. She's done things like this before." Ethan gave a small nod. "Noted." Lucas lingered, then slipped away into the dim cabin. Maya turned to Ethan, her voice shaking. "Over a squeaky chair, they humiliated us, paraded us like criminals." Ethan's eyes glinted cold in the cabin light. "I heard, and I recorded every word." He turned back to his phone, his notes expanding into a dossier, because this wasn't just about 2 stolen seats anymore. This was about exposing a system that decided who belonged and who didn't, and Ethan Carter was the wrong man to underestimate. The cabin lights dimmed to a soft twilight glow. Most passengers shifted into sleep, pulling blankets to their chins, adjusting seats, closing their eyes. But for Ethan Carter, there was no rest. His screen glowed faintly as his fingers continued tapping notes with clinical precision. Every detail mattered: timestamps, crew responses, passenger reactions. Maya stirred beside him, her body rigid from the cramped seat. She whispered, "Are you still writing?" "Yes," Ethan said softly. "We'll need every piece of this. Facts don't forget." Maya studied him for a moment. She could see the gears turning in his mind, the way his fury transformed into structure. He wasn't just angry, he was building a case brick by brick, the way he had built arguments in boardrooms, dismantling billion-dollar discrepancies until there was nowhere left for corruption to hide. But Maya also saw something else, the weariness in his eyes, the heaviness in his shoulders. She placed her hand gently on his arm. "Don't carry it all right now. You're allowed to be tired too." Ethan gave her a small smile. "Later. Right now. I need to stay sharp." A rustle came from across the aisle. Alyssa Green leaned slightly toward them, her voice low. "Excuse me," she said softly. "I didn't want to intrude, but I recorded what happened earlier. I thought you might want it." Maya blinked, surprised. "You did?" Alyssa nodded, her phone glowing faintly as she pulled up the video. The clip was grainy, but clear enough. Claudia's stern face, the captain's weary voice, Charles sliding smugly into Ethan's seat. The humiliation was etched in every frame. "I study civil rights law at Columbia," Alyssa explained quietly. "When I saw what happened, I knew it wasn't just rude, it was discriminatory. What she did violated the airline's own contract of carriage and maybe even federal law." Ethan's lips curved into the faintest smile. "Thank you, Alyssa. Could you send me that video and your contact information? It may be useful." "Of course," she said. "I'll also write a statement if you need one. What they did to you was wrong, and people need to see it." As she returned to her seat, Maya whispered, "It's strange, isn't it? How strangers see us more clearly than the people paid to serve us." Ethan nodded. "Sometimes witnesses are the only truth that matters." He added Alyssa's name and contact to his notes. Another piece of evidence, another brick in the wall. 2 rows ahead, a woman in her 60s leaned across the aisle. Her southern accent was soft, but steady. "I couldn't help overhearing," she said gently. "My name's Diane Foster. I've been flying with Global Air for 30 years, and I've never seen anything so shameful." Maya gave her a grateful look. "Thank you. I was in premium economy." Diane continued, "I saw the way that flight attendant spoke to you, like you were beneath her. It was wrong. I actually wrote down the time and what I saw in my travel journal. I'll share it with you when we land." Ethan inclined his head respectfully. "Your words mean more than you know. Ms. Foster." One by one, other passengers began to speak up in quiet tones. A businessman named James Wilson explained he had overheard Charles Whitmore complaining about his seat before Claudia appeared. A young couple whispered that they had seen Claudia's face transform when she spoke to Charles, dripping with deference, compared to the cold tone she used with the Carters. The quiet testimonies trickled into Ethan's notes like droplets of truth, each one small, but together, forming a tide. Maya looked around at the faces leaning toward them, the murmurs of solidarity. For the first time since being marched through the aisle, she felt a flicker of warmth. "Maybe they underestimated how many people were watching," she whispered. Ethan's eyes narrowed slightly. "That's what systems like this count on. Silence, but not this time." Hours passed. The cabin swayed with turbulence. Maya drifted in and out of sleep, her head on Ethan's shoulder. Ethan remained awake, every sound sharp in his mind, at 3 in the morning. Lucas Ramirez appeared again, his steps quiet as he slipped into the aisle. He crouched slightly beside them, speaking in a whisper. "I wanted you to know. I spoke to another attendant. Claudia's done this before, always with passengers of color, always with the excuse of operational necessity." Ethan studied his face. "Would you be willing to say that, officially?" Lucas hesitated, fear clouding his eyes. "I need this job. My mom, she has rheumatoid arthritis. The medication costs thousands. My paycheck and insurance are what keep her alive." He swallowed hard. "But yes, if you file a report, I'll back you up. It's the right thing to do." Maya touched his arm gently. "That's brave of you." "Lucas, thank you." Lucas gave a small nod, his voice tight. "I promised myself I wouldn't be part of a system that treats people like this. I'll stand by that." He straightened, glancing toward the front. "Get some rest if you can. Tomorrow's going to be interesting." When he left, Maya looked at Ethan. "You didn't tell him who you really are, did you?" "Not yet," Ethan replied. His voice was quiet but steady. "Timing matters." He returned to his notes, the glow of his screen illuminating the calm determination in his face. The humiliation of being marched through the plane had been real, raw. But now, as evidence piled in, as witnesses whispered their truths, Ethan's composure carried something else, not just survival, strategy. And that strategy would soon collide with an airline unprepared for who exactly they had chosen to humiliate. The wheels of Global Air Flight GA782 kissed the wet tarmac of Charles de Gaulle Airport with a soft screech. The early Paris morning was gray, a fine drizzle tapping against the oval windows. Passengers stirred awake, fastening belts, stretching stiff arms. The cabin filled with the restless energy of arrival, relief mingling with anticipation. Ethan Carter remained seated, his notes neatly saved, his expression unreadable. Maya Carter squeezed his hand. She had barely slept, her mind looping the humiliation of being escorted to the back of the plane. But now, there was something new in Ethan's posture, a calm readiness. "Are you sure you want to do this now?" Maya asked softly. "Yes," Ethan replied, his tone low but decisive. "They thought they stripped us of dignity. They're about to learn who they moved to economy." The seatbelt sign pinged off. A rush of passengers leapt up, crowding the aisle with bags and chatter. Ethan and Maya remained still, a small island of composure amid the chaos. They waited as the cabin emptied row by row. Soon, only a few stragglers remained, and the aisles cleared. "Ready?" Ethan asked. Maya gave a faint, weary smile. "Always." They rose, moving forward against the dwindling flow of passengers. When they reached the curtain dividing economy from first class, a familiar figure appeared. Claudia Barnes, her posture sharp, lips pursed. "The exit is behind you," she said coolly, gesturing back. Ethan didn't break stride. "We're aware." His tone carried no heat, just quiet authority. They stepped into the now empty first-class cabin. Claudia's smile faltered. Up ahead, Captain James Whitaker had emerged from the cockpit, chatting lightly with his first officer. Charles Whitmore was gone, likely the first to bolt off the plane, briefcase in hand. Claudia straightened, irritation flashing in her eyes. "You need to leave the aircraft immediately," she said. Ethan's voice was calm, resonant. "Before we do, I require a moment with you, the captain, and the ground station manager." Captain Whitaker turned, brow furrowed. "Look, I already told you file your complaint through the proper channels. There's nothing more to discuss here." "I'm afraid there is," Ethan replied. He reached into his inner jacket pocket, pulling out a slim leather card holder. He extended a card first to the captain, then to Claudia. Both glanced down at it. Then again, the card was simple, elegant, but its weight was crushing. Ethan Carter, CPA. CISA. CFA Chief Executive Officer and Lead Auditor, Carter & Wells Consulting Group, Global Aviation Division. Captain Whitaker's face drained of color. His easy authority collapsed as if someone had cut invisible strings. Claudia froze, her breath catching audibly. She knew the name, Carter & Wells. Every senior airline employee did. They were the auditors with the power to expose, to report directly to boards and regulators, to turn whispers of misconduct into corporate earthquakes. For a long moment, the cabin was silent. Even the hum of the auxiliary power unit seemed distant, muffled. Maya spoke, her voice steady but edged with steel. "What you're experiencing right now, Miss Barnes, is called acute stress response. Your heart rate is spiking, your cortisol levels are climbing. It's the body's way of realizing that your actions have consequences." Claudia's lips trembled. I don't..." Ethan cut in, voice precise, each word striking like a gavel. "You didn't just inconvenience passengers. You and your captain knowingly displaced paying first-class customers to appease a loud businessman. You fabricated a story about double booking. You attempted to intimidate us with threats of arrest, and you did so based on what I can only interpret as a discriminatory assumption that we would be the path of least resistance. Whitaker swallowed hard, his voice barely above a whisper. I trusted my senior attendant's judgment. And in doing so, Ethan replied coldly, you abdicated your responsibility as commander of this aircraft. You failed to verify facts. You rubber-stamped a lie. That is dereliction of duty. Captain, Claudia's face had gone from crimson to ashen. I misspoke, she whispered. No, Ethan said firmly. You lied, and lies have consequences. He turned slightly, addressing the cabin crew still gathering belongings, their chatter frozen by the shift in atmosphere. This aircraft is now an active audit site. I will require the passenger manifest, crew logs, catering receipts, and the maintenance report on Mr. Whitmore's original seat. Furthermore, I want an immediate meeting with the Charles de Gaulle station manager. As if summoned by fate, a man in a crisp suit appeared at the doorway. Henri Dubois, the Paris station manager, had been alerted by the frantic radio chatter. He paused, taking in the sight, the captain pale as paper, Claudia trembling, and a passenger standing with an authority that clearly surpassed them all. Monsieur Carter, Dubois said quickly, extending a hand. I am very sorry for whatever has occurred. Please, let's move this conversation somewhere more private. Ethan accepted the handshake with quiet composure. Yes, to your office. Bring everything I requested. Dubois nodded rapidly. Of course, right this way. The procession off the plane was surreal. The captain no longer led with authority but trailed behind, hat clutched in his hands. Claudia's shoulders slumped, her severe bun fraying. Crew members avoided her gaze, sensing her fall from grace. And in the center walked Ethan and Maya, not as humiliated passengers, but as arbiters of accountability. In a sterile conference room, deep within the airport's administrative wing, the unraveling began. Henry pulled up the passenger manifest. Ethan leaned forward. Show me seat assignments 24 hours pre-flight. The screen displayed clearly Ethan Carter, 3A, Maya Carter, 3B, Charles Whitmore, 4C, no duplication. Now, the maintenance logs, a single entry glowed, seat 4C noise complaint, about reclining motor, engineering to inspect upon arrival. Ethan's voice was calm but sharp. So the issue was mechanical, not double booking. Miss Barnes, why did you tell us otherwise? Claudia's hands shook. I thought it was simpler. Less disruptive to move black passengers quietly to the back. Ethan's tone cut like glass. That's not simplicity. That's bias. He turned to Whitaker. Did you ask to see the manifest? Did you review our boarding passes? Did you attempt verification at all? The captain shifted, eyes down. No. I trusted her. You trusted convenience over truth. Ethan replied coldly. You allowed bias to dictate command. The silence was heavy, suffocating. Henri shifted uncomfortably in his chair, beads of sweat on his forehead. Monsieur Carter, I assure you this will be investigated. It already is. Ethan interrupted. By me. He closed his notebook, gaze sweeping the room. Effective immediately. This crew is to be grounded pending full investigation. They will not work another flight until cleared by corporate and by my office. They will return to Newark as passengers in economy. The final word landed like a hammer. Claudia flinched. The captain's shoulders sagged. Ethan stood, extending his hand to Maya. We've been awake for 24 hours. We will now proceed to our hotel. You can expect my preliminary report on your CEO's desk by tomorrow. Henri scrambled to his feet. Yes, Monsieur Carter. Absolutely. I will make all arrangements. As Ethan and Maya stepped out into the corridor, the roles had reversed completely. The people who had humiliated them at 35,000 feet now cowered, careers collapsing under the weight of accountability. And Ethan, once treated as powerless, walked with the quiet certainty of a man who knew exactly how much power he truly held. The conference room emptied with quiet urgency after Ethan Carter's final words. Claudia Barnes was escorted out first, pale and rigid, her eyes fixed on the floor. Captain James Whitaker followed, his cap clenched so tightly his knuckles whitened. The crew dispersed in uneasy silence, whispers trailing like smoke in their wake. Only Ethan, Maya, and Henri Dubois remained. The Paris station manager dabbed his forehead with a folded handkerchief, his face taut with stress. "Monsieur Carter," he began, his voice hushed. "I realize this was unacceptable. We will, of course, comply with your instructions, but I must ask, how far do you intend to take?" This Ethan leaned back in his chair, his expression measured. "That depends on what I find. Incidents like this don't happen in isolation. They're symptoms of a culture. My role isn't to punish individuals, it's to examine systems." Maya sat beside him, her presence quiet but unshakable. "And what happened on that flight is the system laid bare. Policies twisted by prejudice, convenience chosen over truth, authority abused because they assumed no one would challenge it." Henri nodded nervously. "I understand. If you require additional documentation, I'll need everything." Ethan interrupted. "Crew rosters for the last 12 months, complaint logs, customer service records, diversity training reports, and, most importantly, incident resolution data. I want to see patterns." Henri hesitated. "Monsieur Carter, some of that information. It requires clearance from corporate—" Ethan's gaze was steady, unyielding. "You have clearance from me. And if anyone questions it, tell them my office will be asking why a global carrier fears transparency." Henri swallowed hard, then nodded. "I'll have my team prepare the files immediately." Maya watched quietly, a subtle pride warming her chest. She had always admired Ethan's ability to cut through noise, to hold people accountable without raising his voice. But here, in this sterile Paris office, she saw the full force of his presence. They had tried to strip him of dignity in front of hundreds. Instead, he stood taller. Hours later, a thick packet of printed reports lay on the table. Ethan flipped through page after page, his pen scratching notes in the margins. Complaints about seating errors that disproportionately involved passengers of color. Service inconsistencies noted in audits but brushed aside. Training modules signed off without actual participation. Patterns began to emerge, ugly and undeniable. "This isn't just one flight," Ethan murmured. "This is systemic neglect. And maybe worse, systemic bias." Maya leaned over, scanning a highlighted section. "Here, look at this complaint. A black family bumped from business class to coach because their seats were overweight due to mechanical recalibration. That doesn't even make sense." Ethan circled the entry. "And notice the resolution apology email, 10,000 miles credited. That's how they bury it. Pay silence. Avoid exposure." Henri shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Monsieur Carter, you must understand, not all complaints are investigated thoroughly. Resources are limited. Resources are always limited when accountability is at stake." Ethan cut in, his tone sharp. Yet, when elite members like Mr. Whitmore complain, suddenly there are unlimited resources to displace 2 confirmed first-class passengers. That tells me everything I need to know about priorities. The weight of his words hung in the air. Maya closed the file gently, her voice softer. "Ethan, do you ever get tired? Fighting this over and over, even when you know the world doesn't want to hear it for the first time?" Ethan's composure cracked slightly. His eyes softened. His shoulders sagged a fraction. "Every day," he admitted quietly. "But then something like this happens, and I remember if we don't confront it, nothing changes." Maya reached for his hand. "Then we confront it, together." A knock on the door broke the moment. Henri stepped out briefly, returning with a young assistant carrying a laptop. "We pulled archived footage from the cabin cameras," Henry explained nervously. Internal use only, but you should see it. The assistant cued the video. Grainy black and white images filled the screen, Claudia leaning toward Charles, her expression deferential, almost eager. Then her posture shifted as she approached Ethan and Maya, rigid, impatient, dismissive. The contrast was unmistakable. Maya exhaled sharply. There it is, proof in pixels. Ethan nodded slowly. Bias doesn't hide from the camera. It exposes itself. He sat back, folding his arms. His voice was calm, deliberate. Henry, schedule me a call with your CEO, Victoria Lang. No delays, no intermediaries. She needs to understand the scope of what I've uncovered before this goes public. Henri paled. Monsieur Carter, that will not be simple. Madame Lang, she is a formidable woman. So am I, Ethan replied evenly. Maya's lips curved into a faint smile. Henry bowed his head. Very well, I will make arrangements. As the assistant packed up, Maya leaned closer to Ethan. Do you think she'll listen? She'll have no choice. Ethan answered. His voice carried the weight of inevitability. Because what started as 2 stolen seats has become a mirror for her entire company. And once a mirror cracks, everyone sees the fracture. The room fell silent again, heavy with the knowledge of what was coming. The storm that began in the cabin of GA-782 was now expanding beyond one flight, one crew, one humiliation. It was about to touch the highest levels of the airline. And Ethan Carter, calm and relentless, was ready to hold the mirror up for the world to see. The next morning, Ethan Carter stood at the window of his Paris hotel suite, gazing down at the streets that were slowly waking with the rhythm of another day. The Eiffel Tower cut a sharp silhouette against the rising sun, its steel frame catching the first glimmers of light. But Ethan's mind was nowhere near the beauty of the city. His thoughts were fixed on the meeting ahead, behind him. Maya stirred, propping herself against the pillows. You've been up since 4, she said softly. Your body's here, but your mind is already in that boardroom. Ethan gave a faint smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. I can't help it. Today isn't just about us anymore. Maya, it's about every name in those complaint logs. Every person dismissed because it was easier than confronting bias. Maya swung her legs over the bed and crossed to him, wrapping her arms around his waist from behind. I know, but remember, you don't have to carry it all alone. When you speak today, it's not just your voice, it's all of ours. He placed his hand over hers, grounding himself in her words. That's why I can't falter. 2 hours later, Ethan and Maya walked into the glass-walled conference room inside Global Air's Paris headquarters. Henri Dubois looked as though he hadn't slept. He straightened his tie nervously as he ushered them in. Madame Lang will join us shortly. She insisted on a secure video call from New York. The entire executive committee may also be on. Ethan nodded once. Good, let them all hear. The screens flickered, and then she appeared, Victoria Lang, CEO of Global Air. Her presence filled the room despite the distance. Mid-50s, sharp eyes, silver streaks in her hair pulled into a sleek bun. Her voice, when she spoke, was crisp, honed by decades of command. Mr. Carter, Dr. Carter, I've been briefed. Ethan studied her carefully. Briefed. That's an interesting word. I hope it wasn't Claudia Barnes or Captain Whitaker doing the briefing. A flicker of annoyance crossed her face. I've reviewed the reports. There are conflicting accounts, but I wanted to hear directly from you. Ethan leaned forward, his voice calm but edged with steel. Conflicting accounts disappear when you look at data. I've reviewed your own records. 12 months of customer complaints. Patterns impossible to ignore. Black passengers disproportionately bumped. downgraded, dismissed, and last night, my wife and I became part of that pattern. Maya spoke up, her tone steady, but laced with emotion. We were marched through that cabin like we didn't belong, not because of a duplication, not because of safety, but because someone decided our dignity was negotiable. Victoria clasped her hands. What happened to you was unacceptable, and I will ensure accountability. Accountability is not firing one flight attendant and calling it resolved. Ethan replied sharply, "This is systemic, and systemic problems require structural change. I'm not here for apologies, Ms. Lang. I'm here for reform." The room went quiet. Even through the screen, the tension was palpable. Victoria's jaw tightened. "What exactly are you demanding?" Ethan placed a folder on the table, sliding it into the camera's view. Mandatory anti-discrimination training audited by third parties. Transparent reporting of complaint resolutions. Independent oversight committee with real authority. And a public acknowledgement from Global Air that what happened on GA 782 was not a glitch, but a failure, one rooted in bias. One of the executives off-screen muttered, "That's excessive." Ethan's eyes flicked to the sound. Excessive is diverting a family from first class to row 42 over a broken chair. Excessive is threatening to have us met by authorities when all we did was insist on what we paid for. What I'm asking for is the bare minimum if Global Air wants to claim integrity. Victoria studied him for a long moment. "You're leveraging this," she said finally. Ethan didn't blink. "I'm documenting this. And if I release it to regulators, to the press, to every civil rights attorney who would salivate at this case, Global Air will not just lose money, it will lose trust. And once trust is gone, no amount of platinum status can buy it back." Silence, the kind of silence that revealed calculation, resistance, and, finally, recognition. Maya broke it softly, her words carrying unexpected weight. "Ms. Lang, I'm a physician. I've treated children who collapse under the weight of systems stacked against them. And I've survived cancer. I know what it means to fight when the odds say you shouldn't. We're not asking for perfection. We're asking for a company that doesn't punish its passengers for existing in their own skin." Victoria exhaled slowly, her composure slipping just slightly. "You realize what you're asking will cost millions." Ethan's reply was calm, steady. "And you realize what you risk if you don't will cost billions." The executives murmured again. Victoria raised a hand, silencing them. "I will consider your proposals, but I need time." "You have 72 hours, Ethan said, his tone final. "After that, the evidence leaves my hands." The call ended, the screen fading to black. The room was heavy with what had just unfolded. Henri's face was pale, his hand trembling slightly as he reached for a glass of water. Maya looked at Ethan, her eyes full of both awe and worry. "Do you think she'll actually do it?" Ethan closed the folder with quiet precision. "She doesn't have a choice. The question is whether she'll act out of principle or pressure. Either way, the outcome will be the same." Maya touched his arm gently. "And what about us after all this? Where do we go from here?" Ethan allowed himself the smallest smile, his voice softening. "Paris. 10 years of promises. Remember, we'll walk those streets and remind ourselves why we fought. And while we do, Global Air will decide how much turbulence they can handle." They stood together by the window again, watching the city hum with life. Outside, Paris carried on, unaware of the storm gathering in its corporate towers. Inside, Ethan and Maya knew the fight was far from over, but for the first time since GA 782, they felt a measure of control. The call with Victoria Lang had ended, but its echoes followed Ethan and Maya Carter throughout the day. As they walked through the cobbled streets of Paris, hand in hand, the weight of what had transpired lingered between them. Maya tried to focus on the beauty, the aroma of fresh bread drifting from boulangeries, the chatter of tourists around Notre Dame, but Ethan's mind never strayed far from Global Air. Later that evening, as they dined quietly at a small bistro near the Seine, Ethan's phone buzzed relentlessly. He ignored the first few calls until Maya finally urged him, "Answer it. This fight won't pause just because you're in Paris." It was Henri Dubois, his voice taut with urgency. "Monsieur Carter, forgive the intrusion. You should know the story is spreading. A passenger's video has gone online. It's already climbing across social media platforms." Ethan set down his fork slowly. "Alyssa Green," he murmured. He had suspected she wouldn't keep it hidden forever. Henry's voice dropped lower. "There are news outlets requesting comment. Corporate communications in New York is panicking. They didn't expect it to leak this fast." Maya looked at Ethan, her eyes alert. "This changes everything, doesn't it?" "It accelerates everything," Ethan replied. By morning, the headlines were everywhere. Black couple downgraded mid-flight, airline accused of discrimination, video of GA782 sparks outrage. The footage showed Claudia Barnes leaning over Ethan and Maya with that clipped, dismissive tone. It showed Charles Whitmore smirking as he slid into the seat Ethan had purchased. And most damning, it showed the Carters' long walk down the aisle of shame, captured from multiple angles by horrified passengers. The world was watching now. Inside Global Air's New York headquarters, Victoria Lang slammed the door of her office. A stack of newspapers lay on her desk, each splashed with the same story. Executives sat around the long mahogany table in the boardroom, their faces tight with concern. "This is spiraling out of control," one muttered. "Our stock dropped 4 points overnight." Another chimed in, "Civil rights groups are already mobilizing." The NAACP just issued a statement. "This could turn into congressional hearings if we don't contain it." Victoria sat at the head of the table, her jaw clenched. "I warned you all what was at stake. Carter gave us 72 hours. Now the clock is ticking even louder." A vice president of communications tried to interject. "We can release a statement, express regret, promise an internal review. That usually calms the storm." Victoria cut him off sharply. "That won't work. Carter isn't some anonymous passenger. He's a CEO, a lead auditor. He knows our weaknesses better than we do. If we offer a hollow apology, he'll dismantle us publicly. He has data, witnesses, and now the entire internet behind him." The room fell silent. The scale of the threat was undeniable. Meanwhile, Ethan sat with Maya at their hotel, laptop open, the glow of the screen reflecting in his eyes. Messages flooded in from journalists, activists, and even shareholders of Global Air. Some asked for interviews, others offered solidarity. Alyssa Green had reached out again, her voice full of conviction. The video's making waves. Civil rights attorneys are already analyzing it. If you want to file a class action, you'll have no shortage of plaintiffs. Maya rested her hand on Ethan's shoulder. "Are we ready for this? If we go down that road, it won't just be about the airline. It will consume us, too." Ethan closed the laptop slowly. "We didn't choose this fight, Maya, but maybe it chose us." Back in New York, Victoria paced her office. She finally stopped, turning to her inner circle. "We need to confront Carter head-on, not as adversaries, but as partners. If he wants reform, maybe we let him design it. But if he refuses, then we prepare for the storm of our lives." One executive frowned. "You'd give him that much power over our own airline," Victoria's voice hardened. "If we don't, the public will. And once the public takes control of the narrative, we lose everything." She sent a message directly to Ethan, bypassing her assistants. "We need to meet face-to-face, neutral ground, tomorrow." When Ethan read the message, his first instinct was suspicion. Maya studied the screen over his shoulder. "She's feeling the heat," she said softly. "The fact that she's asking means she knows she's cornered." Ethan considered it carefully. Meeting her means walking into the lion's den. But lions bleed too. The following afternoon, they met in a discreet conference room at a Paris hotel. Victoria arrived flanked by aides, her presence commanding but visibly strained. The cameras of the press were absent, but tension filled the space as though the entire world were watching. "Mr. Carter, Dr. Carter," Victoria began, her tone more measured than before. "We have a crisis, and I believe neither of us wants to see this airline destroyed." Ethan's response was steady. "We want to see it transformed." She studied him. "You've placed me in an impossible position. My board fears the costs of your proposals. But my conscience, yes. I do have one tells me you're right. Still, you must understand, structural change in a company this size is like turning a ship in a storm." Maya leaned forward, her voice calm but cutting. "Then you'd better start turning fast, because the storm is here." For the first time, Victoria looked shaken. She clasped her hands together, then spoke carefully. "If I agree to your terms training, oversight, transparency, what do I get in return?" Ethan's eyes didn't waver. "You get a chance at redemption. You get a narrative not of collapse, but of courage. And you get the future of Global Air intact, but betray that chance. And the documents, the witnesses, and the video will ensure Global Air becomes a cautionary tale taught in every business school." The room was silent. Then Victoria finally nodded. "I'll take your deal. But I need one thing from you. Patience. Give me time to move this through the board." "You have 72 hours left," Ethan replied firmly. "No more." Victoria's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the weight pressing down on her. She extended her hand across the table. Ethan looked at it for a long beat, then clasped it with a grip that was firm but not forgiving. The deal was struck, but trust had not been. In New York, the boardroom of Global Air felt less like a place of strategy and more like a battlefield. Screens across the wall flashed live coverage anchors, dissecting the GA 782 incident, lawmakers calling for inquiries, advocacy groups staging protests outside terminals. The company's logo, once a symbol of prestige, now appeared alongside phrases like systemic racism and corporate cover-up. Victoria Lang stood at the head of the table, her posture rigid. She had just returned from the tense meeting in Paris, but there was no time to rest. Her executives were restless, their voices rising in overlapping arguments. "This is a public relations nightmare." One shouted, "No! This is a regulatory nightmare." Another countered, "The Department of Transportation is already drafting letters, and if the FAA gets involved, we'll be buried in lawsuits before the quarter ends." Victoria slammed her hand on the table. Silencing them, "Enough. We cannot shout our way out of this. We need a strategy." The chief financial officer leaned forward, his voice cold. "The strategy is containment. Issue another apology, increase compensation for affected passengers, and fire the crew involved. That's the standard playbook." Victoria's gaze sharpened. And what happens when Carter releases his data? When the complaint logs show a systemic pattern of bias? When the world realizes this isn't one flight attendant's poor judgment, but a corporate failure years in the making? Silence. The truth they didn't want to admit now sat in the middle of the table. Undeniable. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, Ethan Carter sat in the quiet of his Paris hotel room, reviewing the deluge of emails. Civil rights attorneys offered pro bono representation, shareholders demanded updates, and dozens of strangers shared their own experiences of discrimination in Global Air cabins. Maya sat beside him, scrolling through her phone. "Listen to this one," she said softly. A woman writes that her father was removed from a flight years ago for questioning why he didn't get the meal he paid for. She says he never flew again. He died last year, still carrying that humiliation. Ethan closed his laptop slowly. "This is why we can't stop. Every story is another fracture in their armor, and together, those fractures become collapse. The next day, Victoria faced her board again. The atmosphere was hostile, executives bristling with resistance. "You've allowed one man to hold this company hostage," one board member spat. Victoria's reply was measured, but her eyes were ice. "He's not holding us hostage. He's showing us a mirror, and if we refuse to look, the public will break it over our heads." Another member sneered. "You sound like you want to make him a partner." "I want to make him an opportunity," Victoria said firmly. "If Carter designs reform, we don't just survive this, we set a precedent. We become the airline that faced its darkest moment and turned it into leadership. Do you want to cling to the old playbook, or do you want to redefine the future?" The room buzzed with murmurs, some supportive, most skeptical. The CFO shook his head. "Do you even hear yourself? Independent oversight, third-party audits. It's suicide for our bottom line." Victoria's voice dropped, dangerous in its calm. "Our bottom line is already bleeding. Look at the stock ticker. Look at the headlines. If we don't invest in rebuilding trust, there won't be a bottom line left to defend." The fracture lines were clear: those who saw reform as survival, and those who saw it as surrender. That night, Victoria returned to her office alone. She poured herself a glass of water, staring out over Manhattan's glittering skyline. Her phone buzzed. It was an email forwarded by her assistant. A shareholder coalition representing billions in equity demanded an emergency meeting. The subject line made her stomach tighten. Accountability or exit. Across the city, news outlets carried another twist. Lawmakers were calling for Victoria herself to testify before Congress. Advocacy groups were demanding she step down. The pressure was no longer just on the company. It was personal. In Paris. Maya sensed the shift before Ethan spoke it aloud. "She's cornered," he said, closing his laptop after another string of updates. The pressure isn't just external anymore. It's eating her own leadership alive. Maya tilted her head, thoughtful. "And what will she do? Fight you or join you?" Ethan's eyes were steady, unblinking. "She'll try to do both, but only one will save her." The next morning, Victoria called Ethan directly. Her voice was clipped but carrying an undertone of fatigue. "Carter, the board is divided. Shareholders are threatening revolt. I need more than demands. I need a plan we can execute." Ethan didn't hesitate. "Then, listen carefully. You don't have 72 hours anymore. You have 48. Implement independent oversight. Launch transparent reporting. And put it in writing that this company acknowledges systemic bias. Not a rogue employee. A systemic failure." Victoria bristled. "Do you realize what that admission means legally?" "Yes," Ethan said calmly. "It means Global Air might survive." She exhaled slowly, the weight of her decision pressing against every word. 48 hours. "If I move, will you stand beside me when we announce it?" Ethan glanced at Maya, then back at the phone. "If you move decisively, yes. But if you hesitate, I won't be standing beside you. I'll be standing against you." When the call ended, Maya touched Ethan's hand gently. "You're asking her to tear down her own walls." Ethan's reply was quiet but firm. Sometimes walls are the only thing holding rot in place, and when they fall, light gets in. Back in New York, Victoria gathered her closest allies. For the first time, her voice wavered slightly as she spoke. "This company is at a crossroads. If we resist, we collapse. If we reform, we bleed, but we heal. Carter is right. The only question is whether we have the courage to choose healing." The room was silent, the weight of history pressing in. The morning sun had barely crept over the Paris skyline when Ethan Carter slipped on his blazer and glanced at Maya. She sat by the window of their suite, her coffee cooling beside her untouched. Her eyes were on him, but her thoughts were elsewhere. "You didn't sleep," he said softly. Neither did you, she replied, then smiled faintly. Your mind was racing all night. I could feel it. Ethan exhaled, tugging his cufflinks into place. This is the day. If Victoria Lang makes her move, it changes everything. If she doesn't, then the fight gets uglier. Maya rose and touched his shoulder. Whichever way it goes, you've already shifted the ground beneath them. You've forced the world to look at something it's ignored for too long. That's no small thing. Ethan. He nodded, though the weight of what lay ahead pressed heavy against his chest. Across the Atlantic, Victoria Lang arrived at Global Air's New York headquarters before dawn. The building's lobby buzzed with reporters shouting questions as security hustled her inside. She had been through countless crises in her career, but never one like this. The scandal was no longer confined to the airline industry. It had spilled into the broader culture. Pundits debated it on morning shows, pastors preached about it from pulpits, and civil rights leaders called it a test case for corporate America. In the boardroom, she faced the directors once again. I've spoken to Carter, she announced, her voice even. He's given us 48 hours to act. He expects a public acknowledgement of systemic bias and the implementation of independent oversight. The CFO slammed his palm on the table. Absolutely not. That's corporate suicide. You're asking us to admit liability on a global stage. Victoria's eyes narrowed. We're already liable. The only question is whether we own the truth or let others weaponize it against us. Carter is not going away. Neither is the public. An older board member leaned back, his tone measured but cutting. Victoria, you're forgetting something. This isn't about Carter. This is about us. Our legacy, our wealth. Do you really want history to remember you as the CEO who surrendered the company to a single passenger? She steadied her breath, feeling the room's hostility closing in. History will remember us either way. It will remember if we refuse to change, and it will remember if we found the courage to lead. The standoff was clear. The fracture that began days ago now threatened to split the company in two. Meanwhile, in Paris, Ethan reviewed his preliminary audit draft with his legal team over video conference. He spoke with a calm authority that made even seasoned attorneys take notes quickly. Our evidence is airtight, he said, pointing at a spreadsheet glowing on his screen. Complaint patterns, dismissal rates, crew testimonies, all of it shows systemic negligence. If Global Air refuses to admit fault, this becomes the cornerstone of a federal case. But if they cooperate, it becomes the blueprint for reform. One lawyer frowned. Are you prepared for the blowback if they try to smear you? They'll dig into your life, your career, your finances. They'll try to paint you as opportunistic. Ethan's jaw tightened. They can dig. They won't find anything except the truth. And if they come for me personally, that only proves how far they'll go to avoid accountability. Maya reached over, placing her hand on his arm. Her voice was soft but steady. Don't forget, Ethan, this fight isn't just about systems and policies. It's about people. The woman whose father stopped flying. The young man who felt invisible. Lucas, who took a risk by telling the truth. Every name in your notes is a life. That's why you can't let them intimidate you. He met her gaze, gratitude flickering across his face. You always remind me what's at stake. That afternoon, the internet exploded with another twist. Alyssa Green, the law student who had filmed part of the incident, posted a longer video. It included not just Claudia Barnes ordering the Carters out of their seats, but also the snippet of Charles Whitmore joking in the galley about how money talks. The video spread like wildfire, hashtags multiplied, protesters gathered outside Global Air offices in New York, Paris, and London. Reporters hounded Charles Whitmore as he left his Manhattan office. His attempts at deflection. It was all a misunderstanding, only fueled the outrage. His company's stock began to dip, investors fearing association with his name. Victoria watched the chaos unfold from her office, her phone buzzing nonstop. It wasn't just Carter anymore. It was the tide of public opinion, roaring louder by the hour. That evening, she called Ethan again. Her tone was different, less combative, more weary. "Carter, the walls are closing in. The board is split. Shareholders are restless. The public is out for blood. If I move forward with your plan, I'll be risking my position. You know that, don't you?" Ethan's reply was steady, almost gentle. "Then risk it. Because leadership isn't about survival, it's about doing the right thing when it costs the most." There was silence on the line. For a moment, Ethan thought she might hang up, but then she spoke quietly. "If I do this, I'll need you beside me, not just as a critic, but as a partner. Are you willing to stand in the fire with me?" Ethan glanced at Maya, who nodded. "I'll stand there," he said, "but not for you. For everyone who's been silenced, humiliated, or dismissed. If you're serious about change, then yes, we'll face the fire together." The call ended, and Maya exhaled slowly. "Do you trust her?" Ethan shook his head. "Not yet, but I trust pressure. And right now, pressure is forcing her hand." The next morning, Global Air announced an emergency press conference. The media descended like vultures, cameras flashing, microphones thrust forward. Rumors swirled. Was Lang resigning? Was Carter suing? Would the airline collapse in their Paris hotel room? Ethan adjusted his tie as Maya watched him. He looked calm, but she could see the storm beneath his stillness. "You ready?" she asked. "As ready as I'll ever be," he said, straightening his shoulders. "This isn't just about us anymore. It never was. In New York." Victoria Lang stepped up to the podium, her expression composed but grave. Behind her, the Global Air logo gleamed under the lights. The world waited, breath held, for her to speak. The atrium of Global Air's New York headquarters looked more like a theater than a corporate lobby. Bright lights flooded the stage. Cameras crowded the aisles, and the low roar of voices filled the space as reporters speculated about what was about to unfold. Security officers flanked the entrances, their radios buzzing with clipped instructions. At the podium, a polished sign read, "Global Air Emergency Press Conference." The air was heavy with anticipation. Every news outlet in America and several abroad had sent correspondents. The scandal had grown too large, too symbolic, to ignore. Victoria Lang walked onto the stage first, her navy suit immaculate, her face composed. Yet even under the bright lights, the shadows beneath her eyes betrayed the sleepless nights. The crowd hushed. Microphones angled forward. "Good morning," she began, her voice carrying the calm authority of a practiced executive. "We at Global Air recognize that the events of Flight GA-782 have caused tremendous pain and sparked a necessary conversation about bias in air travel. Today, we are here not to excuse, but to acknowledge and to commit to change." Reporters scribbled furiously. Some whispered to each other, already sensing the gravity of what was coming. Victoria paused, then continued. "For too long, corporations, including ours, have hidden behind procedural language and isolated incidents. But the truth is, clear systemic bias exists within our operations. The experience of Mr. and Dr. Carter is proof of that. And, for the first time, Global Air is admitting it openly." Gasps rippled across the room. The admission was unprecedented. No major airline had ever publicly acknowledged systemic bias. Victoria turned slightly, and a second figure emerged from backstage. Ethan Carter walked calmly to the podium, his tall frame radiating quiet authority. The sight of him sent a shockwave through the room. Reporters leapt to their feet. Camera shutters clicked wildly. Ethan adjusted the microphone. His voice was steady, deliberate, but it carried the weight of a man who knew the world was watching. "My wife and I boarded Flight GA-782 expecting dignity, respect, and the service we paid for. Instead, we were humiliated and displaced, not because of a system error, but because of assumptions tied to the color of our skin. That is the hard truth. The room was silent, every ear tuned to his words. But this story isn't just about us, Ethan continued. It's about the many passengers who wrote to me in the last few days. A father forced off a flight after questioning his meal. A young woman overlooked again and again for service while others were prioritized. Stories of silence, humiliation, dismissal. What happened to us was not an accident. It was part of a pattern, and patterns demand accountability. He looked out across the sea of faces, the cameras reflecting in his eyes. That is why I am working directly with Global Air to launch an independent oversight initiative. Every complaint will be logged and reviewed by third-party auditors. Every crew member will undergo mandatory bias training, and every systemic failure will be documented and addressed, not buried. Victoria stepped back to stand beside him. The image was powerful, the CEO of Global Air and the very passenger whose ordeal had sparked this crisis, now side by side. Questions erupted instantly. Reporters shouted over each other. Mr. Carter, do you trust Global Air? Ms. Lang, are you resigning? Will there be lawsuits? Is this an admission of guilt? Victoria raised a hand, her expression composed. This is not about resignation. This is about responsibility. My position remains at the board's discretion, but my focus today is ensuring that no passenger endures what the Carters endured. Ethan leaned forward again, his voice calm but pointed. Trust is not built by words, it is built by actions. Global Air's leadership has 48 hours to begin implementing these changes. If they fail, I will not hesitate to bring this evidence directly to federal regulators and to the courts. This is not a negotiation. This is accountability. A hush fell again. His words landed like a gavel strike. From the back of the room, a young reporter stood and asked, Mr. Carter, do you believe this moment could change the entire airline industry? Ethan considered the question. Then spoke with quiet conviction. It has to, because this isn't just about flying. The cabin of an airplane is a mirror of our society. Who gets prioritized, who gets dismissed, whose comfort matters, and whose humanity can be set aside. If we change the rules in the sky, maybe we can begin to change them on the ground. The applause started slowly, just a few scattered claps, but then it spread, building until the atrium echoed with it. Even some employees standing along the walls joined in, their expressions a mixture of relief and pride. The press conference ended, but its impact was immediate. News channels cut to live analysis. Commentators described the moment as historic. Social media lit up with clips of Ethan's words. The hashtags, flying with dignity and accountability, in the air trending within minutes. Outside, protesters cheered as the news spread that Global Air had admitted systemic bias. Civil rights leaders praised the Carters for using their ordeal to force change. Even skeptical analysts admitted the boldness of Victoria's move could mark a turning point. Backstage, away from the cameras, Victoria turned to Ethan. You just raised the stakes higher than I imagined. Ethan met her gaze evenly. The stakes were always this high. Now the world knows it. Maya, who had been watching from the wings, stepped forward and gently touched Ethan's arm. You were brilliant, she said softly, but more than that, you were human. People felt it. He gave her a tired smile. I wasn't speaking as a CEO today, or even as an auditor. I was speaking as a man who refuses to let dignity be negotiable. That night, coverage of the press conference dominated every major network. Clips of Ethan's remarks were replayed on primetime television. Editorials hailed it as a watershed moment in corporate accountability. Critics, of course, questioned whether Global Air's promises would translate into real action, but no one could deny the shift that had occurred. In the quiet of their hotel suite, Ethan and Maya finally allowed themselves a moment of stillness. She curled up beside him, her head on his shoulder. "Do you realize what you just did?" she whispered. Ethan chuckled softly, though his eyes were heavy with exhaustion. "Started a fight I can't walk away from." "No," she said, "you gave people hope, and that might be harder to fight than anything else." The morning after the press conference, the world was buzzing. Newspapers hailed the moment as historic. Headlines read, "Global Air admits bias," "Ethan Carter forces corporate reckoning," and "A turning point in air travel." In their Paris hotel suite, Ethan Carter sat at the desk, scrolling through article after article. The praise was overwhelming, but so was the scrutiny. Some commentators lauded him as a trailblazer, a voice that gave dignity to the voiceless. Others accused him of self-interest, of leveraging personal humiliation for corporate influence. Maya Carter came up behind him, resting her chin on his shoulder. "You can't read them all, Ethan," she said softly. "You'll drown in it. I need to know the narratives," he replied, "because narratives shape pressure, and pressure shapes action." She kissed the side of his head. "Just don't forget, you're more than the headlines." Across the ocean in New York, Victoria Lang convened her executive team again. This time, the atmosphere was tense but subdued. The press conference had stunned the world, and while some board members still fumed, others had shifted. The admission of bias, though risky, had won cautious praise from lawmakers and activists. Victoria opened the meeting with a decisive tone. "We are no longer debating whether change is coming. Change is here. Our task is to implement it before the storm consumes us." She laid out Ethan's proposals: independent oversight, transparent complaint reporting, mandatory training. Executives exchanged wary glances. The CFO shook his head. "This will cost millions." Victoria, her response was immediate. "It will cost billions. If we don't, we're not calculating expense anymore. We're calculating survival." Meanwhile, Ethan met privately with Alyssa Green and Lucas Ramirez at a cafe near the hotel. The young law student and the flight attendant looked nervous but determined. Alyssa leaned in. "Your words yesterday were powerful, but promises fade fast. If we want this to stick, we need more than a press conference." Ethan nodded. "You're right. That's why I want your voices in the Oversight Committee. Not just executives and auditors, real people who witnessed the failures firsthand." Lucas shifted in his seat. "That means going against my own union. Against colleagues I've known for years. They'll call me a traitor." Ethan's voice softened. "They'll call you courageous. Systems don't change because of silence. They change because someone risks speaking the truth." Lucas looked down, then slowly nodded. Alyssa gave a faint smile. "I'll do it. I'll put my name on the line. Someone has to." As they spoke, Maya watched quietly. She admired Ethan's ability to inspire, but she also saw the toll it took. His shoulders carried more than a company's sins. They carried the burden of people who now looked to him for deliverance. That evening, back at the hotel, Ethan admitted the weight pressing on him. What if it's not enough? Maya. What if the system swallows these changes and spits out the same old patterns? She took his hands firmly. "Then you keep fighting. But Ethan, don't mistake yourself for the whole movement. You lit the fire. That's enough. Others will keep it burning." Her words steadied him, even as doubts gnawed at the edges of his resolve. At Global Air, internal fractures deepened. Some employees welcomed the reforms, relieved that the company was finally acknowledging reality. Others grumbled that the airline had caved to public pressure. Anonymous leaks began surfacing emails from staff mocking diversity initiatives, records of past complaints that had been buried. Each leak added fuel to the firestorm. Victoria read the reports late into the night, exhaustion etching lines across her face. She knew she was losing allies within her own leadership team, yet she also knew retreat was impossible. Ethan Carter had forced her hand, and now her legacy would hinge on whether she could deliver. The following day, she called Ethan directly. Her voice carried the weight of someone balancing on a knife's edge. "Carter, I've begun drafting the reforms, but the board is restless. Shareholders want timelines. Regulators want proof. I need you in New York. Now." Ethan hesitated. He looked at Maya, who listened quietly. "If I go, it means stepping deeper into their arena. They'll try to co-opt me, use me as a shield." Maya squeezed his hand. "Then, don't let them. You don't go as their shield. You go as their mirror." Ethan nodded slowly. "Book us on the first flight, but not Global Air." When the Carters arrived in New York, the city felt like a furnace of attention. Cameras followed them from the airport to their hotel. Protesters carried signs with their names. Supporters chanted for justice outside Global Air headquarters. The weight of expectation was enormous, almost suffocating. That night, Ethan stood by the hotel window, staring at the skyline. "Tomorrow, we sit at the same table with the people who tried to bury us in row 42, he said quietly. "And they'll expect me to help save them." Maya came to his side, slipping her hand into his. "Not save them. Save the people who will sit in those cabins after us. That's who you're fighting for." He looked at her, his eyes tired but resolute. "Then, I can't afford to falter." The next morning, as Ethan prepared to walk into the Global Air boardroom, the world was waiting outside. Cameras flashed, chants echoed, and the line between humiliation and hope had never been thinner. The Global Air boardroom was perched high above Manhattan, a fortress of glass and steel. From the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city stretched endlessly, but inside the room, the air was heavy. Executives in dark suits murmured among themselves, eyes darting toward the empty chair at the head of the table. When Ethan Carter entered, the murmurs ceased. Cameras weren't allowed inside, but the tension was as thick as if the entire world were watching through those windows. Ethan, in a charcoal gray suit and a calm expression, walked with measured steps. He carried no notes, no laptop, just his presence, a presence that unsettled the people who had once thought of him as disposable. Victoria Lang stood near the head of the table, waiting. Her voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed fatigue. "Mr. Carter, Dr. Carter, thank you for coming." Maya, at Ethan's side, gave a polite nod. She wasn't here as decoration. She was here as anchor. The chair beside Victoria remained empty, reserved for Ethan. He paused, then deliberately chose a seat further down the table. The gesture was small but powerful. He would not be seen as part of the hierarchy that had allowed this injustice. He was here to confront it, not to merge with it. The CFO spoke first, his tone sharp. "Let's be clear. This meeting is not about relitigating the Paris incident. It's about ensuring the company survives the fallout. Mr. Carter, you've stirred a storm, and frankly, you've put billions at risk. What exactly do you propose?" Ethan leaned forward, his voice calm but commanding. "I didn't stir the storm. Your employees did, your systems did, your culture did. All I did was refuse to remain silent when those failures targeted my wife and me. If you want survival, you start with truth." A murmur rippled through the room. Some executives bristled, others lowered their eyes. Victoria gestured for quiet. "Let's hear him." Ethan outlined his proposals: independent oversight, transparent reporting, whistleblower protections, bias training tied to measurable outcomes. Each word was measured, but behind them was steel. "These are not suggestions," he concluded. "They are the price of your credibility." The COO scoffed. "You think you can dictate terms to a company of this size? You're one man, Carter." Ethan's gaze was unflinching. "I'm not one man. I'm the voice of every passenger you've humiliated, every complaint you've buried, every employee silenced by fear. And if you doubt that, Step outside and listen to the crowd gathered on your doorstep. For a moment, silence hung heavy. Then the board's general counsel, a sharp-eyed woman named Eleanor Briggs, spoke carefully. There are legal implications. If we admit systemic bias, we invite lawsuits, class actions, regulatory probes. This could sink us. Maya's voice cut in, steady but edged with emotion. You're already sinking. Every day you deny reality, you lose not just customers, but humanity. You can count dollars, but can you count dignity? Because that's what you've squandered. Victoria studied her. Then Ethan. She saw not just outrage, but clarity. But others weren't swayed. Charles Whitmore, brought in as a consultant to represent high-value customers, leaned forward with a smirk. I've flown more miles with this airline than anyone in this room. And frankly, the idea that I should lose my privileges because of some political stunt is absurd. Ethan turned his eyes on him. Calm, piercing. Privileges. You mean the privilege of taking what isn't yours, the privilege of watching others displaced so you can recline comfortably. That's not loyalty, Mr. Whitmore. That's entitlement, masquerading as value. Whitmore flushed, but before he could respond, Victoria cut in. Enough! This isn't about one passenger's comfort. This is about our company's survival. The debate stretched for hours. Resistance clung stubbornly. Some executives clung to profit margins, others to denial. But with every calm rebuttal, every fact Ethan laid down, the balance shifted. Maya's steady interjections pierced the corporate armor, reminding them that this wasn't abstract policy, it was human lives. At one point, Ethan revealed data he'd compiled on the flight response times in first class versus economy, patterns of complaint handling, disparities in service by demographic. He laid the evidence bare, methodical as any audit. The room couldn't look away. Victoria finally leaned back, her voice weary but resolute. We don't have a choice. Either we implement these reforms or Global Air collapses under the weight of its own denial. But before consensus could settle, Eleanor Briggs spoke again, quietly but firmly. We have another issue. The Department of Transportation is preparing an inquiry. They've already requested internal records. If what Carter just presented matches what's in our files, we're facing more than bad press. We're facing federal action. The room went still. Ethan said nothing, only folded his hands, waiting. Victoria broke the silence. Then, we act now. Full transparency. Full reform. And Carter, she looked at him directly. We need you at the table. Not just as an accuser, as an architect. Maya tensed beside him. She knew what that meant. Deeper entanglement. Deeper responsibility. Ethan's mind turned as he measured the cost. Accepting meant carrying the fight further, becoming the symbol they wanted to co-opt. Refusing meant risking that they would backslide once the cameras dimmed. Finally, Ethan spoke. If I join, it will be on my terms. I won't be your shield. I won't be your excuse. I'll be your accountability, and I'll make sure the world sees every step you take. For the first time all day, Victoria allowed herself a faint, tired smile. Then, maybe there's hope for us yet. When the meeting adjourned, Ethan and Maya stepped into the lobby. Through the glass doors, they saw the crowd still chanting, still holding signs. Reporters surged forward as the couple emerged. Ethan raised his hand for quiet. Today, Global Air took its first step. But one step doesn't end a journey. We'll hold them accountable, and we'll need all of you to watch, to speak, to demand better. This fight doesn't belong to me. It belongs to all of us. The crowd erupted in cheers. Maya slipped her hand into his, whispering, You did it. You turned their boardroom into a courtroom. Ethan looked at her, his voice low. No, I just reminded them that the verdict belongs to the people. The next morning, news networks replayed clips of Ethan Carter exiting Global Air headquarters. His words, This fight doesn't belong to me. It belongs to all of us, echoed across television screens and social media feeds. To many, he was a hero. To others, he was a threat. In the Carter's hotel suite, Maya watched the coverage while Ethan stood at the window, gazing down at the street where supporters still gathered with signs. She spoke softly. "They've made you a symbol, Ethan. But symbols can be targets, too." He nodded, his jaw tight. "That's why we keep control of the narrative. If we let them define me, we lose." Meanwhile, inside Global Air's offices, the mood was anything but unified. Victoria Lang had returned to her corner office, exhausted but resolute. She knew the board had reluctantly bent to Ethan's terms, but she also knew not all of them intended to follow through. The CFO paced angrily. "He's hijacked us. We're letting an outsider dictate policy. If we don't push back, the precedent will destroy our authority." Victoria fixed him with a steely look. What destroyed our authority was humiliating 2 paying passengers and thinking no one would care. Carter didn't create this mess. We did. But dissent festered. A group of senior managers began whispering about ways to stall the reform's delay training, bury reports, dilute oversight committees. They believed public outrage would fade. They underestimated how firmly Ethan had planted the story into the public consciousness. That afternoon, Ethan and Maya met with Alyssa Green and Lucas Ramirez again, this time in a quiet conference room offered by a civil rights nonprofit. Alyssa looked energized, though her eyes were shadowed with fatigue. "Ethan, you forced their hand, but don't underestimate corporate inertia. They'll agree to everything on paper and do nothing in practice." Lucas shifted nervously in his chair. "She's right. I've already heard murmurs from crew. I know people saying reforms are just theater. That management will wait until the noise dies down." Ethan leaned forward. "Then we don't let the noise die. Alyssa, you'll help craft the legal framework for oversight. Lucas, you'll testify publicly about what you saw. We build so much momentum that Global Air can't stall without the world noticing." Lucas's face paled. "Publicly, Ethan. I could lose my job. My union won't protect me if I go against senior staff. My family depends on my income." Ethan's tone softened. "I won't pretend the risk isn't real, but silence has a cost, too. You saw what happened to us, and you know it wasn't the first time. If you speak, you're not just protecting my family, you're protecting yours, and countless others." Maya added gently, "Lucas, courage doesn't erase fear. It just means you choose something greater than fear. You already proved you care about what's right. This is the next step." Lucas swallowed hard, then gave a slow nod. "If I do this, I'll need protection. Legal, financial, something to fall back on." Alyssa leaned in. "We can build that. Whistleblower protections, pro bono representation. You won't stand alone." For the first time, determination flickered in Lucas's eyes. "Then I'll do it." Later that evening, Ethan and Maya took a walk along the Hudson River. The air was cool, the city alive with movement. Maya slipped her hand into his. Every step deeper, the stakes grow heavier. "Are you ready for what comes if Global Air tries to make you the villain?" Ethan exhaled slowly. "I've lived long enough with people writing me into their stories. If they try, we'll write louder." The next day brought a test. An anonymous leak surfaced a memo circulated within Global Air's management weeks earlier, dismissing concerns about bias in seating practices. The memo included a damning line: "Incidents of perceived discrimination are statistically insignificant and best handled with minimal compensation to avoid escalation." News outlets erupted. Commentators called it proof of systemic rot. Protesters doubled outside Global Air headquarters, demanding resignations. Victoria slammed the memo on her desk when she saw it. Who in hell thought this was acceptable? She demanded of her inner circle. No one spoke. The silence was damning. Across town, Ethan watched the coverage with grim satisfaction. They buried the truth for years. Now the truth is burying them. But backlash was not limited to Global Air's leadership. Certain voices in the media began attacking Ethan personally. Opinion pieces labeled him an opportunist, a corporate mercenary, even a race-baiting CEO. The smear campaign was subtle but coordinated. Maya showed him one such headline, concern etched on her face. They're coming for your credibility. Ethan's voice was calm, though his eyes burned. Then we keep stacking evidence higher than their lies. The truth is the only shield worth carrying. That week, a town hall was scheduled in New York. Regulators, activists, employees, and customers packed into a vast auditorium. Cameras rolled live. On stage sat Victoria Lang, Ethan and Maya Carter, Alyssa Green, and nervously Lucas Ramirez. When Lucas's turn came to speak, his hands trembled, but when he looked into the crowd, he saw Ethan nod once, steady and firm. Lucas took a breath. I was there. I saw what happened to the Carters, and I heard my superior call it the path of least resistance. This wasn't a glitch. It was a choice, and I can't keep quiet about choices like that. The auditorium erupted in applause. Cameras zoomed in on his face, capturing the vulnerability and courage mingled together. Lucas's testimony electrified the public. Overnight, his name trended on social media, hailed as a whistleblower with integrity. But as Ethan knew, with every surge forward came resistance. That night, Lucas received an anonymous message warning him to watch his back. Alyssa's inbox flooded with hate mail. Ethan himself was followed by a black SUV for several blocks before it disappeared into traffic. In their hotel room, Maya confronted Ethan. They're scared. That's why they're lashing out. But Ethan, how far are you willing to push before they try to break us? He sat on the edge of the bed, shoulders heavy but eyes resolute. Maya, they already tried to break us when they dragged us to row 42. Everything since then is just proof they're afraid of losing control. And fear means they know change is coming. The days after the town hall blurred into a storm of headlines, interviews, and sleepless nights. Lucas Ramirez's testimony had ignited a fire that no one could ignore. Protesters surrounded Global Air headquarters. Shareholders demanded emergency meetings, and regulators circled like hawks. For Ethan and Maya Carter, the fight had shifted from proving the truth to surviving the backlash. In their hotel room, Ethan sat at the desk with his laptop open, combing through leaked documents Alyssa Green had obtained. Each file revealed another layer of indifference from Global Air's leadership dismissed complaints, redacted reports, spreadsheets, treating bias claims as operational nuisances. Maya brought him a cup of tea and placed a hand on his shoulder. Ethan, you haven't slept more than 2 hours in 3 nights. You can't lead this if you burn yourself out. He rubbed his eyes. I know, but every page I read makes me realize how deep this rot goes. They've been treating discrimination like turbulence and inconvenience to smooth over, not a crisis to fix. She crouched beside him, steady and firm. Then you show them it's a crisis, but you also show them we're not broken. Remember, the system isn't just fighting you, it's trying to wear you down. That evening, they headed to a dinner meeting with civil rights leaders. As they left the hotel, a black SUV idled near the curb. Maya stiffened. It looked like the same vehicle that had followed them days before. Ethan noticed it too, but forced calm into his voice. Get in. Don't look back. The SUV followed for 3 blocks before peeling away. Inside the cab, Maya's hands trembled slightly. This isn't just corporate pushback anymore. Ethan, they're trying to intimidate us. He reached for her hand. Fear only works if we let it. They can shadow us, but they can't silence us. Meanwhile, inside Global Air, opposition hardened. A group of senior managers convened in private, furious at how much control Ethan seemed to wield. Charles Whitmore, still stung by Ethan's rebuke in the boardroom, leaned forward with a sneer. We're letting a disgruntled passenger hijack our company. If we cave to him, every customer will think they can run this airline. One of the managers muttered. He's not just a passenger, he's a CEO with a platform. Whitmore slammed his fist on the table. Then discredit the platform. Leak something. Dig into his past. Find anything to make him look like the opportunist we say he is. But Eleanor Briggs, the general counsel, intervened sharply. Be very careful. If it looks like retaliation, we won't just face lawsuits, we'll face federal indictments. This is no longer corporate politics. This is survival. Victoria Lang listened in silence, her face unreadable. When the meeting ended, she lingered by the window, staring at the city below. She knew her company was at war with itself, half fighting for reform, half clinging to denial. And she knew that the man they had tried to humiliate in row 42 now held the balance of their future. The next morning, Ethan received an anonymous email. Subject line: "They're coming for you." The body contained only a single sentence. Check page 7 of tomorrow's Tribune. When the paper hit the stands, an article splashed across the business section. Ethan Carter's quiet conflicts. Did he use airline incident for leverage? It suggested that Ethan had orchestrated the controversy to gain consulting influence, citing unnamed sources. Maya threw the paper on the table, her eyes blazing. This is their smear. They're trying to paint you as manipulative. Ethan remained calm, though his jaw tightened. Smears only work if people believe them. And I've given the public enough truth to drown lies. Still, he knew the attack wasn't random. It was calculated. If they couldn't beat him in the open, they'd try to poison the air around him. That afternoon, a second town hall was scheduled this time, called by federal regulators. Ethan, Maya, Lucas, and Alyssa were invited to testify. The auditorium was even more crowded than before, with press crammed shoulder to shoulder. When Ethan took the microphone, he didn't defend himself against the smear. Instead, he focused on the bigger picture. This isn't about one couple, one whistleblower, one leaked memo. This is about a culture that decides whose dignity is negotiable. And until that culture changes, no amount of PR can save this airline. The crowd erupted. Regulators scribbled notes. Victoria, seated off to the side, watched with a conflicted expression, part admiration, part fear of what his words meant for her company's future. Then Lucas stepped up, voice trembling but strong. "I testified once, and I'll testify again. I saw it with my own eyes. I heard the words, path of least resistance, and I won't let those words define us anymore." The room thundered with applause. Alyssa followed, laying out a legal roadmap for reform. Her clarity and youth electrified the audience, painting a vision of what accountability could look like. But not everyone was swayed. After the session, as the Carters exited into the crowded street, a man shoved through the crowd and hurled an insult. Security intercepted him before it escalated, but the message was clear. The resistance wasn't fading. It was growing desperate. That night, Ethan sat at the edge of the hotel bed, staring into the dark. Maya sat beside him, her voice quiet. "You can still walk away. Ethan, we could go home. Let the system eat itself." He shook his head slowly. "If I walk away, they win twice, once by humiliating us, and again by proving silence works. No, Maya, we push until the breaking point, and then we push further." Outside, the city roared with protest chants echoing through the night. Ethan closed his eyes, letting the sound wash over him. It wasn't just noise. It was the heartbeat of a movement he hadn't chosen but could no longer deny. Tomorrow, Global Air would have to make a choice in full view of the world, and Ethan Carter was determined they wouldn't escape it. The morning of the board's emergency meeting arrived with a tension that could be felt across the city. News vans lined the sidewalks outside Global Air's headquarters. Protesters filled the plaza, chanting for justice. Federal regulators were watching closely. Investors were restless. The world was waiting for an answer. Inside the sleek glass tower, the atmosphere was suffocating. Victoria Lang sat at the head of the table, flanked by the board of directors. Across from them, Ethan and Maya Carter entered the room with quiet dignity, accompanied by Lucas Ramirez and Alyssa Green. Cameras weren't allowed inside, but everyone knew the outcome would be public before sundown. Victoria opened the session with measured formality. We are here today to decide how Global Air responds not only to Flight GA782, but to the systemic issues that have now come to light. Her gaze swept the room, lingering for a moment on Ethan. Mr. Carter, would you like to begin? Ethan rose slowly. He didn't need notes. His voice carried the weight of sleepless nights and unshakable conviction. This isn't just about my wife and me. It isn't even just about one flight. This is about a company that has, for years, chosen convenience over conscience. It's about passengers whose complaints were dismissed, whose dignity was traded for comfort, and it's about whether this airline will continue to pretend that culture is sustainable. He let the silence linger, forcing every director to meet his eyes. You can choose denial, or you can choose reform. But make no mistake, the world is watching, and history will remember which path you take. Maya stepped forward, her voice gentler but equally resolute. When Claudia Barnes humiliated us, she didn't see two human beings. She saw a problem to be moved. But what she didn't see is that humiliation leaves scars, not just for us, but for every passenger who has ever been told they don't belong. You have the power to make sure no one else carries those scars. Lucas Ramirez cleared his throat nervously, then spoke. I was there. I heard her say, path of least resistance. And for too long, I stayed quiet when things like that happened. Not anymore. You need to protect crew who speak up. If you don't, the silence will eat this company alive. Finally, Alyssa Green, sharp and articulate, laid out a roadmap. Global Air must establish independent oversight, overhaul its training, and implement transparent reporting. Anything less is cosmetic. Anything less will fail. When they finished, the room felt different, charged, unshakable. Victoria nodded once. Thank you. The board will deliberate. Hours later, as the sun dipped low, Victoria returned to the microphone set up in the lobby. The crowd outside hushed. Reporters leaned forward, pens poised. Global Air acknowledges the systemic failures brought to light by Flight GA782, she began. Effective immediately. Claudia Barnes is permanently barred from employment in this industry. Captain James Whitaker is demoted and required to undergo retraining. Charles Whitmore's preferential treatment has led to the suspension of his loyalty privileges. But more importantly, this company will undergo sweeping reform. A new Office of Equity and Accountability will be created with independent oversight. Every complaint will be reviewed by an external body. And we will commit $50 million to programs promoting diversity and anti-discrimination training across our network. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Victoria continued, her voice steady. We thank Mr. Ethan Carter, Dr. Maya Carter, Mr. Lucas Ramirez, and Ms. Alyssa Green for their courage. Their testimony will guide us into a new chapter. To them, we extend not only our apologies but our gratitude. The plaza erupted in applause and chants of victory. Cameras flashed. The world had its answer. Back at their hotel that night, Ethan and Maya stood on the balcony, overlooking the city lights. For the first time since the ordeal began, the tension in their shoulders eased. Maya leaned against him. It's over. Ethan shook his head gently. No, it's beginning. Change doesn't end with announcements. But tonight we breathe. She smiled, weary but radiant. You know what I kept thinking about my father? He used to tell me stories of sitting at the back of the bus. And here we were, in 2025, being marched to the back of the plane. But this time, it didn't end there. This time, the story changed. Ethan wrapped his arm around her. History spirals, but every now and then, someone bends it toward justice. We did that, Maya. Together. A knock on the door interrupted them. Lucas stood there, looking humbled but proud. I just wanted to say thank you. If you hadn't stood up, I'd still be too afraid to speak. You gave me courage. My mother cried when she saw me on TV. She said for the first time, she felt like our voices mattered. Ethan clasped his shoulder. You found your own courage. Lucas, never forget that. Later, Alyssa joined them too. She looked almost overwhelmed. I've had 3 law firms call me today. Civil rights groups want me on their cases. But honestly, the most important thing is seeing people online saying, this happened to me too, and now I feel like it matters. That's the real win. The 4 of them shared a quiet toast, glasses raised under the Parisian night sky. It wasn't champagne that made the moment sweet, it was solidarity, the sense that their pain had planted seeds of change. Weeks later, back home in New York, Ethan and Maya hosted a small gathering on their rooftop terrace. Lucas was there, promoted to lead flight attendant. Alyssa too, her career taking off with a renewed sense of purpose. Friends and family filled the space, the city skyline glittering beyond. Ethan raised his glass to dignity, to truth, and to the reminder that even when the system tries to push you back, you can stand firm. And when you do, the world shifts, Maya added softly, and to hope, because without it, none of this means anything. The clinking of glasses echoed into the warm evening air. For Ethan and Maya Carter, what began as humiliation on a flight had transformed into a beacon. They had forced a corporation to face its shadow. They had shown the world that dignity is not negotiable. And in doing so, they had left a legacy far greater than any first-class ticket, a legacy of courage, accountability, and healing. At its heart, the story of Ethan and Maya Carter is not just about air travel. It is about dignity, truth, and the courage to speak when silence would be easier. Their experience reminds us that discrimination often hides in ordinary moments, in decisions made casually but felt deeply. Yet it also shows us that when people choose to stand firm, change can ripple far beyond one incident. For older audiences especially, this story carries echoes of struggles you may have witnessed before on buses, in schools, at workplaces. It asks us to reflect. Have we ever stayed silent when someone else's dignity was dismissed? And it challenges us to imagine what might shift if we chose empathy over indifference. The lesson is clear: injustice may wear new faces, but it never disappears on its own. It takes people steady, ordinary people who refuse to look away. And when we do, we leave behind more than just headlines. We leave hope. Thank you so much for spending your time with us and walking through this story together. If it touched your heart, if it made you pause and reflect, we invite you to help us share it further. Please like this video, share it with someone who might need the reminder, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that matter. Your support helps keep these voices alive.